Welcome to the H.I.T podcast, H.I.T, Human Resources, Insurance, and Technology. I'm your host, Toby Kennedy. We are here on our year in review episode because we have come up on our 1-year anniversary. We're so excited. Thank you so much for joining us week in and week out for what we hope are bite-sized, digestible, really well-curated content. Every week we're dropping into your feed on Tuesdays. Give us about 15-ish minutes of your time, and we hope we're giving you some relevant conversations. This week's episode is brought to you by Montage Insurance Solutions, and without any further ado, let's jump right into a few of our favorite moments from year one at the H.I.T podcast. I want to start, and maybe just to kind of dive right in, when you say teach people not to be a-holes, right? Teach people sort of not to be a bigger jerk than they need to be. What does that look like in practice? Like, what does that really, how do you encounter that?
It's very interesting. So what is it? I think we all know what it's like to have the difficult, challenging supervisor, colleague, team member. We know what that's like, and we know the challenges of that. But I find that there is a through line. I think other than, a small percentage of people in the world, most people are not actively malignant, narcissistic, negative, evil people. Yeah. Even if they're doing things that are not effective and maybe they're not likable or they're quote unquote difficult, it's not a purposeful thing. It's more a response to something deeper. And usually that deeper thing is where we all could use some support. So where do we get to kind of step back, take a breath, and stop being consistently triggered by all of the things? And I think it's that trigger point that has us react and respond in ways that protect ourselves. We know CYA, right, in the workplace. We do a lot of things that are not really effective from a leadership perspective. They just keep us safe. Yeah. Right. And they keep us maybe on top of our little tiny domain. Right. But what we're trying to do, especially with this audience, right, with you all who are watching, you're leaders. And I always say everyone is a leader. It doesn't matter where they are in the organization, but especially this audience. You're all leaders. And so the opportunity is there to really get clear on your own self-mastery, meaning like stepping back from the things that trigger you so you can think really effectively and wisely about how you communicate with people, especially people that are different than you.
And I want to talk a little bit about that, about employee development. And I think that for the audience of human resources at home, hearing from a CEO and how important it is for you to recognize strengths in employees in general, and to bring them along and to take them kind of to higher heights, and therefore hopefully elevate, your organization, your brand, right? As a CEO, you're hopeful to progress and get better year in and year out. And perhaps one of those strategies is bringing along the employee staff. And of course, in your specific example, I'm very grateful to be living proof of that. But I wonder if you can talk from the vantage of a CEO with respect to that topic, bringing employees along, playing to strengths, and some of your thoughts surrounding that.
Okay, thank you so much. It's a thrilling topic for me. Take care with a lot of heart. It's interesting. I think being a female CEO, it does let me come from a different perspective, if you will. And so I think it's really playing to people's strengths is the most important thing that I do. There are people who have actually shifted roles. There's been in the past where someone really wanted to be in sales and that really wasn't their thing at that time. So it was like, why don't you learn from the ground up and let's do this for a while. Account management, make sure you know everything. And then you shift into sales. Or others, like right now, I'm kind of super excited to say that we have a young woman. She is going to be delivering a child in October, and she really wanted to be a leader. She wanted to manage. She had ideas and dreams, and she brought to me, finally, she's verbalized it to me last time before she got pregnant and had a beautiful son. And so this time she actually brought me a beautiful presentation of what she wanted to do for customer service. She knows, she's worked here, I guess, almost 5 years now. So she knows what we take pride in, really trying to take care of our client in a unique and special way. So she created this wonderful presentation for me. And then she found out she was pregnant. And so I thought, oh no, the same thing, could happen to her if I let it, but I'm not going to let it. So I kind of waited. And then later she came back to me and I said, do you really want this? And she said, yes. I said, okay, well, I'm going to make you a manager of the TPA department. It's a sub-manager because Dawn is the director, of course. And she's just doing a great job and also helping us with Benny, which is our new product we're really excited about. And that's going to be auditing and fun things there. So it's I wanted her to know that she's going to come out on the other side of that pregnancy, not only with a job, but with a promotion that she's walking right back into.
But in addition to looking at what you have within your health insurance portfolio, there are these companies that exist to kind of wrap around, augment, and beef up the benefits that you give to your employees in the fertility space. There's a few different ways that the vendors in this space design their business model, and we'll get into all that in a minute. But one facet I want to address right at the outset is a framing that I've seen a lot of the thought-leading organizations in the space take to this matter. I'd argue that we want to consider broadening the conversation from infertility benefits to family building. And the reason I draw that distinction is, sure, while many of our employees going down this journey are indeed heterosexual male-female couples that are having trouble conceiving for one reason or another, that's not the entirety of the conversation, right? Part of our population that are going through this family building journey, infertility isn't really their issue, right? So some of our same-sex couples or even individuals that want to have a child and they don't have a partner, they get folded into the conversation about family building because family building includes but extends beyond things like egg freezing and in vitro to include conversations about surrogacy, adoption, and international or domestic adoption, foster care, right? All of the broader dialogue that comes with re-terming it as family building. Sort of feels like you're saying, hey, where is like the modern HR, right? And we talked a little bit before we fired up the cameras that we kind of have a front row seat being so close in Los Angeles, so close to Silicon Valley, so close to some of the real creative minds in HR. So I wonder if you can talk to me about your opinion on kind of what does the modern solid HR practitioner look like? What are they doing? What's going on?
Oh my goodness. So we could talk about this for a while, but I think that Colleen McCreary is the first episode on my podcast. She's my first interview. And where the chief people officer role is really going is being able to not just be the partner for the business, but also more so in a very dynamic way, not just looking at the employee experience and what to do for employees and be the advocate for employees in order to allow the business to perform at its best, but also dribble into communications and also changing the reporting structure. So she talks about the potential for the chief people officer to not report to a COO or a CFO, which really hinders our ability to do good work, but actually reporting to the CEO or even to the board to keep the CEO accountable. And why is this important? Because it's really difficult from a chief people officer's perspective to do what we need to do, what's best for the business, which is what's best for the employees, when we're reporting to the CEO, who we also are coaching throughout our time there. We are the HR business partner for the CEO and for the CEO's executive team. So if we reported to the board, we would be able to provide really rich and meaningful insight to the board without fear of repercussions and really partnering with the CEO in a very different way.
You were brought in and our firm dealt with a piece, but not all of the insurance aspects. And when you brought us in, you said, Toby, I'm on a listening tour. I'm coming out here with 2 ears and 1 mouth, and I just want to get to know all the vendors. And ultimately, thankfully for us, you wound up expanding the role of our agency. But I want to ask you about coming into a situation at an employer and getting your sea legs, assessing where things are, and sort of moving forward in a capacity that's valuable to that organization.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a fascinating way to frame the question, which is where do you start?
Yeah.
And you always start at the beginning, right? And so great beginnings of stories have characters, they have a plot, they have a purpose, and anchoring to what business you're in, what your purpose, finding your why, both at an individual and organizational level, helps you frame and make decisions on how to approach evaluating any function, but particularly the human resources function, which is centered around people, often anchored to technology, and the complexity and matrix of how decisions are made are broad. And so finding your way to build connections and relationships and speed of trust early in your journey helps you get a better grounding and sensibility for where the priorities, where the opportunities, and to some degree where the talents and strengths lie.
So, it's funny that you kind of are mentioning the topics you're mentioning, because I think that one of what I've perceived to be a great strength of yours is that you have an HR acumen, you have an HR understanding, but a lot of what you do is so much bigger and more strategic, right? It's real C-level and even like looking out and helping groups strategically plan. So I think that, I'd be curious to hear you talk about that kind of a mix, and maybe, for people that are interested in, getting a seat at that sort of a table, or kind of how you approach that kind of blend of two, what can often be distinct and different things coming together in one individual.
It is officially strategic planning season. So it's the time of year where most organizations are having those conversations. And depending on the industry that your listeners and followers are from, it could be a required thing that the board of directors and executives go through, or it could be something that's just good business, right? And so conducting this strategic perspective or overlook of what's happening in the organization, setting goals for the future, making sure we're aligned and have a shared vision, and working together towards what it is that we want to accomplish for our membership, our client base, et cetera. So with that, though, HR traditionally hasn't necessarily been part of those conversations, even though, let's be real, the people are the most important thing that we have within our organization, the intellectual assets, the minds. And I believe now a lot of industries are progressing in that way, and we do have chief HR officers, we do have chief experience or chief employee officers that are at the table. And if not, we need to be continuing to push to have those conversations. And big picture, though, having your HR or your people at the table of strategy is critical, because as we grow, any mechanisms that we have for growth are going to require the infrastructure in order to allow that, to have that thrive. And so as we think about branching strategies or retail strategies or things out in the industry, it includes the people. And anymore today, it's really about engagement of those people. And so we have individuals being the best versions of them as well, so they can accomplish the goals of the organization for us.
So here's a scoop. One of the things, for example, in the tough conversations realm, I always talk about is using the word perception. Perception isn't right or wrong. It just is. It's kind of like feelings, right? They're not right or wrong. It's how you feel. If you can talk to people about the fact that something may be missing awareness, that could be creating a perception problem. And I wanted to talk to you about that. You can easily segue that into the most important discussions about your career are made when you're not in the room. That's the same for you as it is for me and everyone else.
God, what a great thought. Oh my goodness. Pause on that.
I want to kind of help you influence what's being said about you in that room someday, but we can fix it now. I can have your back if you'll allow me to. That's a great way to enter into a conversation with someone where they're not going to feel judged. They're not going to feel like, oops, I'm in trouble. And the manager doesn't have to feel so uncomfortable about, I've got to tell them bad news and I really don't want to do it. It's a nice way. It's an easy way that people can, ease into those conversations and have real conversations.
Boy, I have never heard anyone put that so succinctly. But yeah, the most important conversations about your career happen when you're not in the room. What an impactful thought if you really grapple with it. But what's interesting is that actually it dovetails in the question I was intending to ask, which is my perspective. And I don't have the same, length of career as you, admittedly, but I wonder your comment on this kind of idea surrounding, main character syndrome, or, people that are they're the hero of their own story, right? Is that on the rise today? Is that different today for today's managers than it was 10, 20, 30 years ago, where folks, their ability to take negative feedback when, again, you're just an extra in their movie, man. They're the main character.
To a degree, you're not wrong, Toby. I think there are kind of these generalities about, oh, the younger generation likes to take self photos and selfies. We didn't do that when we were younger. Well, we didn't have the cameras and we didn't have the internet. So that's one of the reasons it makes a difference. We probably would have done the same thing. But I want to be careful. Human beings are human beings.
Yeah.
And I think that the truth of the matter is what the younger generation wants is exactly what I wanted. I'm the end of the baby boom. I'm the youngest of the baby boom.
Yeah.
But the same thing for the Gen X that followed the baby boom. You know what I mean? It's like, look, we're all human beings. We want to work for an organization that cares. We want to feel like our work is meaningful. And we want to feel like we're on a trajectory. We're making a difference. We're building our resumes. We're building our potential. That's basically the same. Now, there are different things that we see now. We talk more about work-life family balance, which remote work is helping us kind of get some traction around, which is good. We talk more today about corporate social responsibility and environmentalism. That probably wasn't on the radar screens of the earlier generations. Right. But these are all really noble things. And companies that are smart are going to look and say, what is it that Gen Y and Gen Z want? And how do we get there? How do we get them there? And some of the things, I joke about this, but it's as simple as putting a barrel in your break room so that people can drop off the glass bottles and the plastic bottles and the cans.
Right.
I mean, that does change the world's footprint. And if we know that the younger gens are looking for this idea of sustainability and environmentalism, that doesn't even cost you anything. But boy, what a great thing to do to let everyone know that their needs and their values are in alignment with yours as a business owner or senior manager or whatever you happen to be.
That's sort of the 101 on these things. It does ultimately bring in a little bit more HIPAA compliance. It brings in a little bit more work on the HR team, even as far as ACA and some of the things you need to do. But it also brings in a lot more insight, a lot more claims visibility, a lot more positives going on. So you can design a plan that's completely fully insured. You can design a plan that we're talking about now that's total ASO, administrative services only, just self-funded, or lots of stuff in between. There's all these sort of hybrid-y kind of middle ground plans. So as you're sitting this year, you're maybe looking at your new plan year, especially if you've got a calendar year product. It's about that time you're sitting down, you're looking. We just wanted to do a quick high-level overview for any of our listeners. So as you're getting into these conversations, you're coached up on some of the moving pieces and what might be the right fit for you and your plan design at your company. Yeah, and speaking of a great organization, I just kind of want to shout out the way in which you've gotten promoted, and maybe if we can talk about employers and organizations when they do it right? You get a little bit of like preloading before you just get tapped and said, hey, you did a good job at X, so now we're going to have you do this totally different job Y, and good luck.
Yeah, I think employers should set up and start looking about who they want to promote, but I also think employees need to run their own career. So I've always wanted to add value as a HR professional, and I never wanted to be known as a paper pusher, although that is part of our job, but we want to add value, and so I always worked hard to try to add value to see how I could be part of the game and part of the strategy, and so I had to understand it, and so I believe it's twofold. Employees have to drive their own career, and find out what's adding value to the organization. And the organization has to also be awake to understand who those people are to be part of the succession plan. Because the learning curve, there's a lot lost there. And I think when you have a succession plan, it's so much smoother. It was hard for me to let go of my chief of HR role, but it wasn't. I mean, I love the HR role, but I have a great successor, and there is nothing that I need to worry about because we planned and we grew, and she grew and I grew and the team has grown. So I think it's so seamless and less impactful to the organization when you plan and you're intentional about it.
Yeah, obviously COVID changed everything for everybody. Back in March of 2020 when, we all sent folks home for what we thought was a week or two. And then it was a month or two. And then it was a year or two. And now we're 3 years plus post, quote unquote, COVID. But yet you're still testing. And, I just had COVID for the second time. And what does that look like? And I think, every company has struggled so hard with what's right for them.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone's gotten it perfectly right.
Right.
I think it's such a unique and customizable consideration. So, you've had companies that early on said, you can work remote from anywhere forever.
Right.
And they've now walked that back.
Well, and the guy moves to Oklahoma, right? It's like, okay, so we can work from remote. And then now they're like, hey, we're calling you back. He's like,
Well, I mean, just the HR issues around the taxation of people going into states you don't have nexus in. I mean, no one thought about that.
Totally.
And it's like, oh my gosh, we don't have anyone in Nebraska. And so now as we kind of look at this kind of what I would call the next phase of the kind of post-COVID environment, I think that, a lot of companies now are looking, now we're in a new year.
Yeah.
And they think, let's have, a new take on it all. And so I think that, every day you hear about something.
Yeah.
And, I think that there's a generality that, most employees got used to working from home and they liked it.
Yep.
And so getting people back has been a real challenge.
I what's funny is I think that kind of pre-COVID, for us at least in our company, and this was true of a lot of companies too, is it's like the answer was 0 days from home. You're here, boots on the ground, 40 hours a week, right? And as you mentioned, during the height of it, the answer was 100%. You're at home exclusively, right? And obviously there's essential businesses and some of those exceptions, but overall, a lot of organizations, what I'm getting at, went from 0 to 100. And now, as we're, like you said, what does post-COVID even mean? But we're sort of post-COVID, borrowing that term. Where in the middle is the right spot, right? Where's the sweet spot, and how do you tinker with that, and what's the science?
Yeah, as I said, it's been really challenging, I think, for every company. We've had clients of ours that have gone, kind of more directive and say, you must be back X, whatever that X might be.
Yeah.
We've taken the approach that our business is kind of a couple different pieces. Our creative team has worked remotely since the pandemic started, and it's been fine. Most of their work is transmitted electronically. It's been okay. You have some issues with creativity and kind of generating that kind of environment to innovate together. But the other half of our business is production, running equipment and printing machines. They never left. They never went home.
Yeah.
And so we've always had more than 50% of our folks at Midnight Oil working on site.
Right.
So what we've done is look at the roles that are required to support what's happening on site and not take a blanket one-size-fits-all approach and looked at it job by job.
Yeah.
And that's been tough because, there's, what's best for our people, our clients, the business. It's an equation that's, there's no simple mathematical equation to it, but we've evolved.
I'll back it up that I saw a comedian who was joking about how, at his age, he's like, growing up, you guys have this word mindfulness and being mindful. He's like, well, we didn't need that, right? I was sitting on the bus. I'd look at the dew fall off the window and stare out, and I could be with myself and be silent and still because there wasn't 10,000 pings and pops and blings and blops and trying to get my attention. If I was moving somewhere, I was, I guess, inadvertently mindful, right? And we've gotten away from that, I think, in ways that maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but you're advocating for us to try to find a way back to.
Yeah, I'm advocating for that. I'm advocating for, I was just on a call before I came here with a group of women that I work with, and we were talking about how just taking an hour to 3 hours to 4 hours, whatever you can spare, and just going somewhere that's inspiring to you, whether it's the ocean, the desert, the mountains. I'm a mountain gal.
Yeah.
To just get away and get quiet and think about your team, think about your relationships, think about your business. And Toby, every time it happens, they come back renewed, and it magically somehow new business opportunities show up.
It's because there's the parts of the brain that are constantly talking and processing and are trying to be heard. And if we don't let them be heard because we're so focused in that like urgent, important box, that the maybe important but non-urgent speaker in our brain is trying to break through.
Yeah, it's very true. And, in addition to that, I said there were 9, and I'm not going to get into all 9 today. But, another big one that we hear it all the time, but we don't think of it in terms of, I think, how to be better leaders is also how we're fueling ourselves. Are we fueling ourselves with the right food so that our brains actually operate at their peak, right? Are we getting 8 hours of sleep a night, which is so important because that's when we, when we repair and recover.
Yeah.
And so many times, leadership seminars we go to are about, the bottom line, the numbers, the team, the social media, the marketing, all important. I use all that in my business. But if we want to be great leaders and really make an impact, we have to start here first.
That's all the time we have for you this week here on the HIT Podcast. Join us next week, Tuesday. Join us every week as we drop into your feed. New episodes coming. Year 2 coming at you. We're so excited to be where we're at. Thank you very much for the support. And until next week, make this the best week yet.